I said some things that I truly, truly regret to somebody that I truly, truly loved and cared about. That's when I was in the darkest moment of my life. And there were days where I literally wrote letters to my family, to my friends. I didn't know if I would see the light of day. I didn't even know if I would see 2024. I had no idea who God was. I had no idea who Jesus was. And I started reading the Gospels, and it gave me hope. Knowing and understanding that there's so much light at the end of your darkness. And you have to experience the darkness in order to know what the light is like. When you're in the darkness, that's where you learn the most. We're all here for a reason. We're all here for a purpose, right? And that's when I started getting back in the gym. That's when I started seeing these visions of how I want my life to be.
Welcome to another episode of the 3K Protocol Podcast. Today we have a very special guest, one of my greatest friends. He is an inspiration. He has a lot of stories, great stories to tell, and he's been through a lot throughout his spiritual journey, which he will talk to you guys about today. He is big on fitness. He is an athlete. He does it all. He started to venture into music, learning more about consciousness, reaching higher levels of consciousness. I am blessed to have my great friend Dylan Mahon on the podcast today. For those who don't know and are watching, I met Dylan back when I was in 8th grade. We went to the same school, Poughkeepsie Day School. That's where we really first connected. And like I said, you could ask anybody. He's always had this great energy, this aura to him. He plays sports, always one of the best athletes. Over the years, I've gotten to grow closer to him, and I've realized just this great wisdom that he has. And you guys are gonna get a chance to really hear more from him and see him on this journey. But where has this wisdom come from? You mentioned God, and you give the credit to God. In your words, how would you describe God?
It's a beautiful question. To touch on the first one, wisdom, again, I feel like that does come from God, but it's through experience. But I just say through God because He's blessed me with the gift to experience certain things in my life and then extrapolate things that I needed to learn within those experiences to then apply to, the present moment. So, because I believe everyone has that capability to do those things, but I just give all glory and credit to God because He's given me that gift of being able to learn from those experiences. If that makes sense, hopefully. But the second question was,
different people, come from all around the world. They have different religions, and we hear a lot about different religions, but that frequency, that God energy that guides us. How would you best describe your relationship with God?
Man, everyone's relationship with God is different. Bringing religion into it, I don't consider myself religious at all. I think there's this thing that goes around. It's like religion versus spirituality. I would consider myself spiritual more so than I would religious. Religious, I believe, is man-made. It's something that's constructed for you to, like when you think about Christianity, I'm a Christian, but I'm not someone that I would consider religious, right? Like religion almost puts this, like when you think about Christianity, there's different denominations. You pretty much have to associate with, oh, are you Catholic? Are you, whatever it is. I don't associate with that. I believe everyone has their own personal relationship with God. And the Bible talks about how God is spirit, right? You can pray to God. God is everywhere. God is in the trees. God is in the grass. God is everywhere at once. He created everything. So personally for me, my relationship with Him it's still building. I don't think it's as strong as I want it to be, as strong as I envisioned it being. But in my darkest time, which was just a couple months ago, that's where I found Him. And I think there's a moment in everyone's life where you feel lonely, where you've experienced that darkness, and your last resort, unfortunately, is God, calling on Him. And that was my situation. I'm hitting rock bottom, and that's where I just felt this calling within my heart to just call out and cry out to Him. And that relationship is still growing, it's still developing, but The reason why I give credit to him for everything is because he pulled me out of that situation. So that's how I found Christ. That's how I found God. That's when I started to discover who God is. And I'm blessed to have, seen him.
Right. In my opinion, an illusion is that we need to go outside or go to another person, go to church, go to someone who has a certain characteristics or certain qualifications to connect with God. And I believe we see that a lot in different religions. Then a lot of wars that we see in the world today are still based off religion, religious beliefs. Who is God's people? And in my opinion, we're all God's people, and God is everywhere, like you mentioned, in the trees, in the plants. It's this divine consciousness. It's an energy, and the great thing is that we can all tap into that energy. And religions and with ancient texts and Bibles, and certain spiritual beings who have really been here, like Christ, really are here to bring back consciousness and let people know that you have the ability to connect with God, even when you're in your lowest moments.
You don't have to go to, sorry to cut you off. I'm glad you said that, because you don't have to go to church. Again, that's what I mean when I say religious is man-made. It's something that makes you feel like you have to be required to do a certain thing. That's not what God is. That's not what God accepts everyone for who they are. Let me be very clear though. Just because God loves you doesn't necessarily mean that he condones your actions. Okay? But with that being said, he still loves everyone. He created everyone, right? Like, you can form a relationship just speaking to him out loud. That's a way of connecting with God. You don't have to go to church to pray. You don't have to go to a synagogue to pray. You don't have to go to any establishment or, be a specific person or act a certain way to form that relationship with him. No, he wants to hear from you. And think of a relationship with human beings, right? Like, our friendship, imagine if you would, imagine you called me and every single time you called me, I never answered. Is that really a friendship?
Right.
No, think of God the same way. God wants to hear from you, right? Like, if you only call on him when you're having a bad day, is that really a friendship, right?
Right.
If I just called you every single time I was having a bad day, but I never called you just to hear from you or just to see how you're doing, that's not really a friendship. It almost seems like I'm using you in a way. So I think that is how you start and form a relationship with God. It's just like a relationship that you have with a mom, girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever it is. That's what it is. So it's just like, call on him, be genuine, be pure-hearted enough to call on him, and that's where the relationship starts.
I'm sure a lot of us have heard the phrase, ask and you shall receive. All of us have the power of thought and speaking out into the world. We have the opportunity to create our reality by speaking. And the words and even the thoughts that we say to ourselves every day really have an effect on our trajectory and our timeline. So if you really want to start to create that reality, you first have to be conscious of the thoughts and the words that you are speaking out into the world to others, but most importantly, yourself. What are you really telling yourself every day? And Dylan, you mentioned for people who are going through...
Yo, loosen up, bro. Loosen up. No, keep this in. Keep this in. Loosen up. Listen up, bro. Talk to me like we're having a regular conversation.
Right. Let's
keep this in, because these are the genuine moments that people need to see.
Yes, sir.
Loosen up. It's just you and me. Don't even think about the cameras.
Yes, sir. All my 1,000 viewers.
1,000. It's gonna be 1 million soon.
We're speaking it into existence.
Come on now.
You guys see in the comments. We starting off, where we're at right now with these views, but eventually we're both gonna be speaking to the world on a large scale, and we already are. And it's just only a matter of time before more people pick up on this consciousness. And that's really how things happen. Think about it. Before you really became so consistent in the gym and you gathered this knowledge and this wisdom and this energy, it started from where? Your mind, what you were telling yourself. So what did you tell yourself when you were in your lowest point? your darkest hour?
Well, listen, I'll tell you my personal experience. The reason why I'm still here today and the reason why I'm still alive is because of Jesus, of Christ. That's my relationship. That's where I found him when I was in my darkest space, which was a couple months ago, and I'll be vulnerable. This is when I first got out of my relationship. I was very much in love. And, when we, broke up, went down a very, very dark space, very dark time. I said some things that I truly, truly regret. And that's when I was in the darkest moment of my life. And I'm gonna be vulnerable because there could be somebody listening to this that is experiencing the same thing. And hopefully this brings some motivation or some, what's the word I'm looking for? Hope into that person's life. But when I was in my darkest space, when I was experiencing that, I was contemplating suicide. And I'm sure I've shared this with you before. I'm sure maybe I have, but that's how bad it got. But there were days where I literally wrote letters to my family, to my friends, and it was dark, man. It was really dark. I don't want to get emotional, but it was definitely one of those things where it was just I didn't know if I would see the light of day. I didn't even know if I would see 2024. It was that bad where I was kind of just in this very dark and depressing place. I was writing letters. I wasn't going outside. I was stuck in the house. In the month of November, I didn't go to the gym not once. So it was really bad. And I remember I was scrolling in those times I was praying, but I had no idea who God was. I had no idea who Jesus was. Obviously we hear about Jesus. We hear about his name, but I didn't really know what he represented. I didn't know who he was. So I remember I was scrolling on TikTok at the time, and I kept seeing spiritual related content, and it was all about God. It was all about God. And I remember I watched this one particular TikTok, and it was talking about you can't really form a relationship if you don't know who God is. So why don't you get a Bible? And I remember the first time I got my Bible, which my mother got for me, I opened it and I started reading the Gospels. And the Gospels, those who aren't familiar with the Bible, the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, are stories written in the Bible about Jesus and about the message that he pretty much presented to the world, the message that he delivered to everyone, the embodiment of love, light, pulling people out of the darkness, instilling hope into people that have been living in darkness throughout their entire life. And the first book I read was the book of John, and just listening to his words, listening to what he stood for, hearing that he still accepts those who do wrong, and he still shows love to them, and he forgives them for their wrongdoing. It just spoke to my soul. It spoke to me as a person, and it gave me hope. It gave me hope because I was in a time where I truly regretted something that I had said and done to somebody that I truly, truly loved and cared about. And even though, let's just say it never affected them in a negative way, just even having the thought or idea that I messed up killed me. But hearing that Jesus still loved me, still accepted me, God still loves me, still accepts me, and he's willing to redeem me and resurrect me and form almost a new life for me, that's what gave me hope. That's what kept me pushing. That's what kept me going. And that's when I started getting back in the gym. That's when I started seeing these visions of how I want my life to be. And if it wasn't for Christ, if it wasn't for that message, if it wasn't for God himself, I wouldn't be here sitting across from you right now. That's what it is.
Thank you for sharing that and being vulnerable, because not only are you helping so many who will watch this video and really show them that, hey, look, Christ consciousness, the light is in all of us. And you are all able to receive that light and be a being of light, but it takes some work, and sometimes it does take going through your darkest times to see that light.
What worked for me is knowing and understanding that there's so much light at the end of your darkness. And again, there's polarity in the world. You have to experience the darkness in order to know what the light is like. You can't, we're all here for a reason, we're all here for a purpose, right? If you're just living in the light all your life, you're not gonna know what the darkness is. When you're in the darkness, that's where you learn the most. That's where you gain that wisdom that we were talking about. Like, that's where you really discover who you are as a person and who you even want to be, right? So like, for anyone that's going through a dark time, one, I personally would recommend that you form a relationship with Christ, form a relationship with God, pray, truly kind of just like, don't be afraid of your thoughts. Don't be afraid of sitting in silence. Don't be afraid. Don't run to things that aren't fulfilling for you, right? Like, most of the time we fall into this habit of instant gratification. Let me just go on my phone. Let me go out. Let me do something that's distracting me from what I'm feeling, but it's always going to be there with you, right? Knowing and understanding that God is with you throughout everything in your life, forming that relationship with him, understanding that he is there and he's not willing to let you perish and be there by yourself, that gives you the confidence to then deal with what you're actually feeling, because that's the first step of healing. That's how you're going to heal. You're going to be broken your entire life if you keep ignoring it. But when you actually face it head on and you know without a doubt that God is with you every step of the way, that's the first step of healing.
I think we need to hit the bowl for that one.
I appreciate it, but that's not me. That's all God, man.
Yes, sir. And anybody who's watching this, no matter what religion, no matter what ethnicity you are, what gender, what religion you are, where you come from, or what you've been taught, I really recommend and suggest that you always ask questions and you always search for the light. When you're closed off to information, to trying new things, to God, there's nothing he can do to help you. There's nothing you could do. But when you're open to that light, you're now able to step in. You mentioned the darkness. Think of a dark room. When you put on just a candle or a little light, you can now see throughout the room. Just all it took was a little light. Now think of a lit room like this. We have lights. You take something that's dark, it can't overpower the light. It just shows you how powerful the light is.
The light will always overcome the darkness, always.
And for me, a great book that I've read was The Emerald Tablets. Along my journey, I found that the Emerald Tablets is a 36,000-year-old text. And in here, it has just great information, great knowledge about being one with the light, consciousness, having the power of frequency, cymatics, and it claims Thoth, the Atlantean, who was a part of an ancient civilization, was the architect of the Great Pyramids, and he was the author of this tablet. But could it be possible that Jesus, that being of Christ, is actually this person right here? What is one of the core teachings that you live by?
Well, by Jesus, it's love your neighbor as yourself. I think, and let me break that down. What that means is not your neighbor living next to you, right? Like, throughout his time of living, he would give these parables to the people that he was speaking to, preaching to. Someone had asked him, how can I inherit the kingdom of heaven? And he said, love your neighbor as yourself. And the person was just like, what does that mean? And he was just like, he gave this parable of this, at the time of Jesus, Jewish people and Samaritans, people from Samaria, I believe. Think of it, I'll modernize this. They were beefing, okay? Jewish people at this time would refer to anyone who wasn't Jewish as Gentiles, right? Anyone who wasn't Jewish, any Gentile, any Roman citizen at the time, anyone who was from Samaria, whatever it was, they pretty much had beef. Just think of it like that. That's the best way I can modernize it.
Yeah.
Okay. So pretty much Jesus gave this parable at the time, and he said, love your neighbor as yourself. And he told this story of this Jewish person getting beat up, robbed, laid out on the floor. His Jewish brothers and sisters would pretty much just walk by him. They saw him on the floor. Even a priest at the time saw him on the floor, didn't do anything about it, and walked by him. But the one person who actually stopped was a Gentile, was a person from Samaria. He picked him up. He put him on the back of his horse, or camel at the time. I believe it was a camel. He put him on the back of his camel, took him to what we would refer to as a hotel, took care of him, and he even told the guy there, everything, put it on my tab. If he needs anything else, call me. I will come back. And that's the way that he wants us to live, no matter. And we can now apply this to modern day, right? Whether you're black, white, whatever it is, whatever you refer to, or whatever religion you identify with. One of Jesus's teachings that resonates with me so much is love your neighbor as yourself. He doesn't care what you look like. He doesn't care who you are. If I know you, if I don't know you, if I see you on the street, I'm going to help you. And I think that's one of the core teachings that I think everyone needs to apply to their life. I think truly loving people that you don't even know, and as corny as this sounds, that's the way to life. When you are carrying so much anger and resentment or bitterness, or you're so tunnel vision and you block out everyone, are we really living? Think about the best moments you've had in your life. It's typically when you're helping someone else, when you're serving other people. Think about a moment right now where you helped someone that was in dire need of that help. Think about the feeling that you got afterwards. I think that's one of the teachings that I apply into my life from Jesus. But I would definitely say the hardest one is loving your enemies. Right? Like the people that you have beef with, the people that you're angry with, the people maybe that you haven't forgiven yet. Jesus requires you to love them, to still love them. I mean, and think about God, right? Think about how graceful he is. There's a lot of people doing a lot of things that I'm sure he's not condone or that he's not proud of. And yet he still allows rain to come down on the unrighteous and the righteous, if that makes sense. He lets the rain come down on everyone. And this is what Jesus was saying in his parables, right? Like, God still allows the sunlight to come up on everyone. Despite if you're living a righteous life, if you're living an unrighteous life, it still comes down on everyone. That's his love that he has for everyone. Another way of saying it, no matter if someone is kind to you or rude or disrespectful to you, Jesus tells you, like, love them regardless. And I think that's the one that I struggle with the most, but that's the one that I truly hope to incorporate into my daily life.
The things that we judge are really just a part of ourselves.
That's such a good one.
When we realize that everyone is not so different. When you peel back the layer, you realize we're all just beings of light. This is what Christ was talking about. This is what Thoth was talking about. And this is what now Dylan is talking about on this podcast. It shows that anybody can reach this level of consciousness as long as you continue to seek and you move with love. We are really boundless. And the boundaries that are placed on us from when we're young, from whether it comes from family, traditions, or even the media, news, friends, or the enemy, the haters, the darkness.
Yeah.
Once we realize and pull back the layer and realize that the light is everywhere.
You touched on something that was beautiful. Judging people, oh my God. That's what Christ is. He's the opposite of cancel culture. He's the opposite of it. I mean, think about modern days, right? Like, we're so quick to judge someone. We're so quick to call somebody out for something wrong that they did. But you're not righteous. Excuse my language, but you fucked up in your life as well. Who are you to call someone out? Who are you to condemn someone else for the way that they live? Yes, you can come from it from a loving stance. Like, you know what? I don't think you should have done that. I don't think you should be doing this. I think you should maybe change the direction that you're going in your life. But who are you to judge that person or condemn them as if you're this perfect person? Even Christ himself, one of the only person here to walk this earth that was perfect. Perfect. Never sinned once. and yet he still didn't even judge anyone. So who are we to do it? No one is righteous. We've all fallen short in our lives once, twice, thousands of times. So like that, I think that's one of the biggest things. Like, what? Judging when you over here doing God knows what, you know? So I feel like that's one of my favorite teachings from him as well.
Right.
Jesus is funny, man. He was saying, he was saying, who are you to call out someone that has a speck in their eye when you have a whole log in yours? You got a log in your eye and you calling somebody out for the speck that they have in theirs.
I believe Jesus came to raise consciousness.
Absolutely.
And to tell people that no. Don't separate, don't divide, don't judge. Understand that you have the power.
There's more to life than the things that we tend to focus on or put our time into. There's so much more to life than that. Like, why are we wasting our time fighting or quarreling about what religion you should be a part of? If you believe in God, good. That's a similarity that you should share with somebody else, your brother, your sister. So, I don't know, that's just my take on it. And as you just touched on, religion, I feel like divides people. And I think a lot of people, especially in their childhood, has trauma from churches, or a lot of people just have this bad taste. Yo, I was one of those people that, like, anytime you would bring up Christ, anytime you would bring up God, I would kind of just steer away from the conversation because of my history with churches, my history with religion, right? No one ever taught me what God truly is. No one ever taught me what Christ embodies or represents. Nobody taught me any of that, right? All you hear about is church. Oh, you're a sinner, you're going to hell. They instill this fear into you. God is the opposite of fear.
And what is fear?
What is fear? It can stem from comfort. You're too comfortable in a certain situation, right? Let's say if you're so accustomed to living in darkness your entire life, maybe you can't remember one moment in your life where you were happy. You could be fearful to now live in the light. When the light is introduced to you, you've never experienced that before. You've been so comfortable living in the darkness. Although you don't like being there, you've grown so comfortable being there that when now light is being introduced to you, you're so afraid because you've never lived in that area of your life. You don't understand what that side is like. Yes, it's a little enticing, like, whoa, what is this? But it's still like, whoa, I've never been here before, so I'm gonna stay comfortable. That's where fear comes in, right? Comfort, it stems from being comfortable.
Or the lack of information.
It's the lack of information.
Fear is the acronym for false evidence appearing real.
When you are afraid to do something, it could stem from so many different things, right? Like, you don't know what's on the other side, but that's why Jesus tells you to have faith.
Right.
If you just have faith the size of a mustard seed, you can move mountains.
You know, there's truth in lies.
Yeah.
And there's lies in some truths. So when we start to look at things in a one-dimensional or two-dimensional perspective, and we can't be open, and we operate in fear, we're bound to stay divided, stay in a state of fear.
You're stuck in the stronghold. Most people are in this cell, and they have the key to get out, but they're too afraid to open up that door. You know how to get out. You know exactly how to get out, but you're too afraid.
How do you take the time every day to forgive yourself? And what do you tell people watching who are struggling to forgive?
It's tough because it's something that I'm still working on. I think forgiving others is difficult, but I think it's easier than forgiving yourself. I know for me, finding Christ in the time that I did, one of his most prominent messages is to forgive those who hurt you. And that was something that I was working through, that I'm still currently working through, but that's something that I feel like I've managed to achieve in my life. But forgiving yourself is something that's far more difficult because there's times where you can recall certain moments where you're really not proud of it. You're really not proud, and again, those moments can eat away at you. And forgiving yourself and acknowledging and understanding, you know what? I'm human. I make mistakes. So does everyone else. You're gonna fuck up at some point in your life if you haven't already. If you haven't 100 times, 1,000 times, at some point you're going to make a mistake. Everyone has made countless mistakes in their lives. But once you acknowledge that you're human and that you're going to mess up, that's where the forgiveness starts. You have to acknowledge that. And I think when you become aware of that, that's where the process starts. And you just have to work toward it every single day, right? Like, you have to pray about it. You constantly have to look yourself in the mirror and just realize that's not the person that you want to be. Once you realize and discover, okay, you know what, I don't want to be that. I made that mistake. I said that thing. I don't want to be that. So you make the conscious effort to be the opposite of that. And that's by acknowledging, okay, I made this mistake. What can I learn from that mistake? And how can I now apply it to my daily life so I don't make that mistake again? And I think that's the process of forgiving yourself, right?
Yeah.
You have to understand, like, you have to love who you are as an individual because you're still God's child. He doesn't want you to live in a place where you're constantly beating yourself up, or you're depressed, or you're filled with anxiety, or you're living in the past. He doesn't want that for you. You know, it's not just about forgiving other people, it's about forgiving yourself as well.
As someone who I've also worked on trying to forgive myself and other people, and from being in a relationship where I also, experienced heartbreak, I realized that I had to change the way I was thinking of it. The heart never breaks, it only expands. Sure, there's a part of you that may feel like it dies, but really it's always there. When you realize that we're eternal beings, when you realize that separation and even time is an illusion, and that we're in this three-dimensional body where we have limitations and we feel pain for a reason. And that reason is up to us to remember why we chose these certain emotions to feel.
And I like what you said, because that's part of the life experience. That's what makes life life. You have to be grateful for every single experience, even when you fuck up. It's part of the life experience. That's what's so beautiful about life. Imagine if life was just happy, joy all the time.
Yeah. It's like if you
life wouldn't have any meaning to it, would it? Because you're expecting the same thing every single day. When you are humbled, or when you're put in a place where you're experiencing or living in that darkness, and you have to deal with those thoughts, and you have to process that heartbreak, and you have to process that emotion on a day-to-day basis, bro. Yes, it's difficult. Yes, you may not have hope. Yes, you feel like it's the end of the world, or you don't want to be here anymore, but it's those moments that you should appreciate, because if it weren't for those moments, you wouldn't know what it's like to live in the light. You wouldn't know what it's like to experience that love, right? Like, when you experience that heartbreak, those same things that you're ashamed of, are you going to do it again?
Right.
Probably not, right? That's part of the experience. That's part of what we're here to do. Think about seasons, bro. You have to die to yourself in order to be reborn again. When you think about the seasons, I know we had a conversation about this before. Think about winter, or fall, winter, spring, summer. Fall, think about the trees. All of the leaves are dying off. They're falling off the tree. And then during the winter season, the trees they have no leaves on them. Snow is coming down. Plants are dying. But then what happens in spring? They're reborn, right? New flowers, new plants, new leaves on the trees come in. That's a rebirth. And then you go throughout summer, and then the same process happens again. It's the same way with life and our own human experience. You're gonna have moments where you're really, really high, but then you're gonna have moments where you're really, really low. And I know we don't like those low moments, and it's really uncomfortable, but it's those moments that make you get back to that high moment. And when you do get back to that high moment, you're so much better than what you were before. God does everything for a reason. And sometimes you have to hit rock bottom in order to learn what you shouldn't be doing. It's the only time we listen.
Right.
You don't listen when you're up on that high horse that you've been riding on for so long. You don't listen. right? You're filled with arrogance.
If you love something greatly, if you're LeBron James, Michael Jordan, or Kobe Bryant, and you love basketball greatly, you don't want to compete and play basketball just in preseason.
Also, yeah, absolutely.
In the around in the park, you want to play at the highest level, at the highest stage, to the greatest you can. To
Absolutely.
your greatest ability, and that applies to life.
And guess what? You become more appreciative of those moments later down the line. You become so much more appreciative in the Bible. And guess what? You become more appreciative of those moments later down the line. You become so much more appreciative. In the Bible, there's this story, I don't know if you're aware of, like, the book of Jonah. Just to break it down really quick. I'll break down the end. Toward the end, this guy named Jonah, his relationship with God, he goes off and he's on this mountain, and the heat, it's super hot out, the sun is boiling, and God pretty much decides to give him a plant that grows overnight and that covers his head and gives him shade. He's comfortable now, he's not experiencing the heat, he's comfortable, he's chilling. But then God also decides, okay, now I'm going to plant a worm here. And then overnight the worm came, and then the worm pretty much ate the plant. Now he had no shade. And the guy kept complaining to God, like, why did you just give this to me and then take it away? Why did you allow the worm to eat the plant? And God was just like, why are you upset? Why are you upset? I provided this for you. It's up to you to take care of it. It's up to you to take care of it. And the reason why I'm telling that story is, like, you learn to appreciate those things in those moments, right? God will give you anything that you ask for.
Yes.
That's where gratitude comes in, right?
This is why we were talking before about speaking your reality. This is why we have to be very specific in what we say. Because sometimes we ask for something and we receive that thing, but we aren't happy, or we're still in the low vibration, and we're like, man, I thought I'd feel better.
Yeah.
It's on you to realize, like, hey, there are some things that you're gonna that come with that.
That's the way that life works in general, right? So, like, within those heartbreaks, within those dark places, how did you get there? You have to first acknowledge, you know what, it was me that got myself here. It was me that got myself here. Or if you were born into darkness, you also have to realize that everything happens for a reason. What can you learn from those experiences? You breaking out of that darkness and now living in the light plants seeds into people's hearts, knowing that, okay, you know what, I'm living in the darkness, but I see this person living in the light that once lived in the darkness. Now that gives me hope and faith to get out of my situation. Mm-hmm. Everything isn't just about you and your situation. It's all about perspective. Mm-hmm. When you're in that darkness, you have to, like, realize God wants you to realize, I can pull you out of this so you can motivate other people and show other people that they can too. That's what life is about, man.
I have one last question before we wrap up.
Mm-hmm.
If it's true that we come here and it's our choice, we choose to come to this reality, to this planet Earth, to learn, to experience, what would you say you chose to come here for?
I think to spread light. Some way, somehow, to spread light. I don't think I'm there yet, but I think I've come here and I've chose to come here to spread light. I've had dark moments in my life. I'm still experiencing darkness, but I now understand what it's like to live in the light. And knowing what that's like, and also understanding that living in that place, in that space, is abundant. Everyone can live there. Why wouldn't I share it with others? So that's what I want to do. I just want to spread. I believe that's why I came here. I don't know what my purpose is exactly, but I think part of it is spreading the light.
Dylan, everything you just said, I could tell you've been doing that, and you've done that for a lot of people, and you continue to do it. So it's a great thing you've been doing. And thank you so much for coming on. We need to have you back.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Seriously, all love, man. Come on.